A successful billionaire's life turns upside down when he discovers he has quadruplets with the woman he pushed away 15 years ago. As Alex Grayson struggles to reconcile with his newfound family, corporate rivals and dark forces conspire to tear them apart, testing the true meaning of love, redemption, and sacrifice. But before we continue with this story, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and let us know in the comments where you're watching from today. Rain poured down on the busy streets of Manhattan as Alexander Grayson's black Mercedes glided through traffic. Alex stared at his phone, barely noticing the world outside his window. Another successful merger, another billion added to his empire. At 45, he had everything money could buy, except peace of mind. "Slow down, James," he ordered his driver suddenly, his eyes catching something through the rain-streaked window. A woman and 4 children huddled under a flickering streetlight, trying to stay dry. The sight shouldn't have meant anything to him, but something made his heart stop. The woman's face. He knew that face. "Stop the car," Alex commanded, his voice trembling. "Stop it now." James pulled over, and Alex stepped out into the rain without grabbing an umbrella. His expensive Italian suit was getting soaked, but he didn't care. He walked toward the group, his legs feeling heavier with each step. The woman looked up and their eyes met. Serena Carter, the only woman who had ever made him consider giving up his carefully controlled life. The woman he'd pushed away 15 years ago with an insulting offer of money, thinking he was doing them both a favor. But it wasn't just Serena that made his world tilt on its axis. It was the 4 children with her, 3 boys and a girl, all around 14 years old, all with his piercing blue eyes, his dark wavy hair, his sharp features. The truth hit him like a physical blow. "Serena," he managed to say, his voice barely audible over the rain. She pulled the children closer, her chin lifting with the same defiance he remembered. "Hello, Alex, I didn't expect to see you here." The children looked between them, confusion clear on their identical faces. Alex couldn't stop staring at them. His children. They had to be his children. "Are they?" he started, but couldn't finish the question. "Yes," Serena answered sharply. "But you lost the right to ask that question a long time ago." One of the boys, the tallest one, stepped slightly in front of his mother. "Mom, who is this man?" Serena put a hand on the boy's shoulder. "This is Alexander Grayson. He's your father, Michael." The other children gasped. The girl grabbed her mother's hand, while the 2 other boys exchanged shocked looks. "What are you doing out here in the rain?" Alex asked, trying to process everything. Serena's face hardened. "We got evicted this morning. I lost my job at Kutch, the restaurant last month, and with 4 growing teenagers." She shook her head. "We're fine, we don't need your help." But Alex could see they weren't fine. Their clothes were worn, and bags at their feet contained what looked like everything they owned. The children were trying to look brave, but he could see they were cold and scared. "Please," he said, his voice softening. "Let me help. Come stay at my house, just until you figure things out. There's plenty of room." "We don't want your charity," Serena snapped. The girl tugged at her mother's sleeve. "Mom, I'm cold," she whispered. Alex saw Serena's resolve crack. She looked at her children, their children, and then back at him. "One night," she said finally. "Just until I can call my sister tomorrow." Alex nodded and gestured to the car. James was already holding the door open, and one by one they climbed in. The children sat close together, stealing glances at him when they thought he wasn't looking. "I'm Michael," the protective one said suddenly. "These are my brothers, David and Christopher, and our sister Sarah." Alex felt his throat tighten. It's nice to meet you all." The drive to his Upper East Side mansion was silent. Alex couldn't stop looking at them in the rear-view mirror. Quadruplets. He had quadruplets. 4 children he never knew existed. 4 lives he'd missed out on because he'd been too scared to let love into his life. When they pulled up to his house, the children's eyes widened. "You live here?" Christopher asked. "Yes, Alexei," replied simply, leading them inside. His housekeeper, Mrs. Reynolds, appeared immediately, her eyes widening at the sight of 5 wet strangers. "Mr. Grayson." "Mrs. Reynolds, please prepare 4 guest rooms," Alex said, "and find some dry clothes. For everyone." 5 rooms, Serena corrected firmly. "The children can each have their own room." Alex nodded, understanding her meaning. She wouldn't be sharing his room, no matter what their past held. As Mrs. Reynolds led them upstairs, Alex stood in his marble foyer, water dripping from his clothes onto the floor. His perfectly ordered world had just been turned upside down. He had 4 children, 4 teenagers who needed him, who he'd failed before they were even born. In his study, he poured himself a drink with shaking hands. The faces of his children flashed through his mind. Michael, the protector, David and Christopher, so alike yet somehow distinct, and Sarah, with her mother's gentle features mixed with his coloring. He'd tried so hard to forget Serena after she left. He'd thrown himself into his work, built his empire, convinced himself that love was a liability. But seeing her again, seeing their children, a knock at his study door interrupted his thoughts. It was Serena, wearing borrowed clothes that were slightly too big for her. "The children are settled," she said, staying in the doorway. "They're exhausted." "Serena, He started, but she held up her hand. "Don't," she said. "Not tonight. Tonight I need to process the fact that my children have met their father for the first time while we were homeless on the street. Tomorrow we can talk about where we go from here." She turned to leave, but paused. "They're good kids, Alex. I've done my best to raise them right, even without your money. They're smart and kind and stronger than they should have to be. Just remember that before you try to buy your way into their lives." With that, she was gone, leaving Alex alone with his guilt and regret. He walked to the window, looking out at the rain-soaked city. Somewhere out there, for the past 15 years, his children had been growing up without him. He'd missed their first words, first steps, first days of school. He'd missed everything. But maybe, just maybe, it wasn't too late to be the father they deserved. Sunlight streamed through the expensive curtains of Alex's mansion as Mrs. Reynolds prepared breakfast for their unexpected guests. The smell of bacon and pancakes filled the air, so different from the usual quiet mornings when Alex would grab a quick coffee before heading to the office. Sarah was the first one down, her long dark hair pulled back in a neat ponytail. She stopped in the doorway of the massive kitchen, her eyes wide. "Good morning, dear," Mrs. Reynolds said warmly. "Would you like some breakfast?" "Yes, please," Sarah answered quietly. "Can I help?" Mrs. Reynolds smiled, touched by the girl's politeness. "Why don't you set the table? The plates are in that cabinet." Alex walked in just as Sarah was carefully placing the plates around the large dining table. He stood awkwardly for a moment, not sure what to say to this daughter he barely knew. "Good morning," he finally managed. Sarah looked up, her blue eyes, his eyes, studying him carefully. "Good morning, Mr. Grayson." The formality hurt, but he knew he deserved it. "You can call me Alex," he said softly, "or whatever makes you comfortable." Before Sarah could respond, thundering footsteps announced the arrival of her brothers. Michael, David, and Christopher burst into the kitchen, their teenage appetites drawing them to the smell of food. "Wow, real bacon!" Christopher exclaimed, then remembered where he was and who was watching. His excitement dimmed a little. "Please, eat as much as you want," Alex said quickly. "Mrs. Reynolds always makes too much anyway." Serena appeared in the doorway, looking tired but determined. She'd clearly been up most of the night worrying. "Children, remember your manners." The kids instantly sat up straighter, using their best table manners as Mrs. Reynolds served breakfast. Alex watched them, noting how they interacted with each other. Michael kept glancing at the doorways, always alert. David and Christopher had their own silent language of looks and gestures. Sarah quietly made sure everyone had what they needed before serving herself. "I called my sister," Serena announced, breaking the awkward silence. "She can't take us in right now. Her husband lost his job and they're struggling themselves." Alex saw the worry cross the children's faces. "Stay here," he said quickly. "As long as you need to. We need to discuss this in private," Serena replied, firmly. "Mom, these pancakes are really good," David interrupted, trying to ease the tension. "Thank you, young man," Mrs. Reynolds beamed. "It's nice to cook for people who appreciate good food." Alex's phone buzzed, his assistant reminding him about the board meeting. For the first time in his career, he didn't want to go to work. "I have meetings all morning, but I'd like to talk when I get back," he told Serena, "and maybe spend some time getting to know the children, if they're willing." The kids looked to their mother, waiting for her response. Serena sighed. "We'll be here." As Alex stood to leave, Michael spoke up. "What exactly do you do, Mr. Grayson?" "I run Grayson Enterprises," Alex replied. "We're a technology and investment company." "The company that makes the Grayson phone?" Christopher asked, suddenly interested. "Everyone at school has one." "Everyone, except us," David muttered. Alex felt another stab of guilt. His own children couldn't afford the phones his company made. "I'll have my assistant bring some over today," he said quickly. "No," Serena cut in. "The children don't need expensive phones right now. What they need is stability and honest conversations." Alex nodded, chastened. "You're right. I'm sorry. We'll talk when I get back." As he walked to his car, Alex's mind was anywhere but on business. His driver, James, noticed his distraction. "They seem like good kids, sir," James ventured. "They are," Alex agreed. "Serena did an amazing job with them. While I was building my empire, she was raising our children on waitress tips and determination." At the office, Alex couldn't focus on the board meeting. His secretary, Victoria Kane, noticed immediately that something was wrong. "Are you feeling all right, Mr. Grayson?" she asked as they walked to his office afterward. "You seem distracted." Alex had known Victoria for 10 years. She was efficient, loyal, and discreet. "I found out I have children last night," he said simply. "Quadruplets, teenagers." Victoria stopped walking. "I'm sorry, what?" "Serena Carter, from 15 years ago. She was pregnant when she left. They're staying at my house now. They were evicted from their apartment." Victoria's face showed recognition at Serena's name. "Sir, there's something you should know. Ms. Carter did try to contact you once, about 14 years ago. She came to the office." Alex felt his blood run cold. "What? Mr. Peterson was your assistant then? He turned her away, said she was probably just another gold digger trying to take advantage of your success. He was proud of how he handled it, told me about it when I took over his position." Alex gripped the edge of his desk, anger coursing through him. "Peterson told her to leave? Without telling me?" "Yes, sir. I'm sorry. I thought you knew. Should I cancel your afternoon appointments?" Alex nodded, already reaching for his coat. "Cancel everything. For the next few days, I need to make this right." Back at the mansion, he found the children in the game room. Someone had shown them how to use the video game system, and they were playing together, laughing and arguing like normal teenagers. He stood in the doorway watching them, his heart aching for all the moments like this he'd missed. "They're naturals." "At it," Mrs. Reynolds said, appearing beside him. "Sarah helped me with lunch. She's a wonderful cook. Michael fixed the squeaky hinge on the pantry door without being asked. The twins figured out how to program the universal remote that's been giving me trouble for months. They're remarkable children, Mr. Grayson." "Yes, they are," Alex agreed. "Where's Serena?" "In the garden. She's been out there for hours thinking." Alex found Serena sitting on a bench near the fountain, looking small and lost in the grand landscape of his manicured gardens. "We need to talk," he said, sitting beside her. "I just found out something that changes everything." Serena turned to face Alex, her expression guarded. "What do you mean?" "You came to see me," Alex said, his voice tight with emotion. 14 years ago you tried to tell me about the children." Serena's face paled. "How did you—" "My assistant told me, my old assistant, Peterson. He turned you away. He never told me you came." Alex ran his hands through his hair in frustration. "Serena, I swear, if I had known—" "Would it have made a difference?" Serena asked sharply. "You made it pretty clear how you felt about commitment when you offered me money to disappear." "I was young and stupid," Alex admitted. "I was scared of losing control of my life, but I would never have abandoned my own children." Before Serena could respond, they heard voices approaching. Bradley Winston, Alex's business partner, was walking through the garden with Victoria Kane. "Alex, there you are," Bradley called out. "Your secretary said you'd be home." He stopped short when he saw Serena. "So I'm sorry, I didn't realize you had company." "Bradley," Alex stood up, "this is Serena Carter. Serena, this is Bradley Winston, my partner at Grayson Enterprises." Bradley's eyes widened with recognition. "Carter, the woman from— the mother of my children," Alex cut him off firmly. "My quadruplets." Bradley's friendly smile froze. Victoria shifted uncomfortably beside him. "I see," Bradley said slowly. "Alex, we really need to discuss the Morrison deal. It's time sensitive." "Not now, Bradley." "Actually, yes, now." Bradley's voice hardened. "The board is already nervous about the merger. If they find out about this situation, they might start asking questions about your judgment." Serena stood up. "I should check on the children." "No, stay," Alex said. "Bradley, whatever you have to say, you can say in front of Serena." Bradley glanced at Victoria, who took the hint and excused herself. Once she was gone, his pleasant facade dropped. "Are you out of your mind?" he hissed. "We're about to close the biggest deal in company history, and you're playing house with some woman who shows up claiming to have your kids." "They are my kids," Alex snapped. "Look at them. Anyone with eyes can see they're mine." "That's not the point. The Morrison family is very traditional. If they find out you have secret illegitimate children—" "Don't you dare call them illegitimate," Serena interrupted, her voice shaking with anger. My children are worth 10 of you. Mrs. Carter, Bradley said condescendingly. I'm sure you believe you're doing what's best for your children. Perhaps we could come to some arrangement. Are you trying to buy me off? Serena laughed bitterly. Just like Alex did 15 years ago? Well, my answer hasn't changed. My children are not for sale. Inside the house, the children had gathered by the window, watching the tense conversation in the garden. Who's that man? Sarah asked. Bad news, Michael answered grimly. Look at Mum's face. Maybe we should leave, Christopher suggested. We're just causing trouble. No, David said firmly. Mum always taught us to stand our ground when we're right. We belong here as much as anyone. Back in the garden, Alex stepped between Bradley and Serena. That's enough. Bradley, go back to the office. I'll call you later. Think about what you're doing, Alex, Bradley warned. Everything we've built could fall apart. Then let it fall, Alex replied. I've already lost 15 years with my children. I won't lose another day. Bradley left, his expensive shoes crunching angrily on the gravel path. Once he was gone, Serena sank back onto the bench. That's what I was afraid of, she said quietly. Your world isn't ready for us, Alex. It never was. My world needs to change then, Alex replied. He sat beside her. Serena, I need to tell you everything. About why I pushed you away back then. You deserve the truth. Serena looked at him for a long moment. Okay, but not here. The children are watching from the window. They both turned to see 4 heads quickly duck out of sight. Despite everything, they shared a small smile. They get that from you, Serena said. Always watching, always planning. They get their courage from you, Alex replied. Let's go to my study. Mrs. Reynolds will watch the kids. In Alex's study, Serena sat in one of the leather chairs while Alex poured them both water. He couldn't offer her a drink this time. There was too much at stake. Before I met you, he began, I was engaged to someone else, Catherine Morrison. Serena's eyes widened. Morrison? As in the family your company is trying to make a deal with? Alex nodded. Her father owns Morrison Tech. The marriage was more of a merger than a romance. But then I met you at that coffee shop, and for the first time in my life I felt real love. So you ended things with Catherine? I tried to, but her father threatened to destroy my company. We were just starting out. Then one word from him would have ruined everything I'd built. I was a coward. Instead of fighting for what I wanted, I chose the safe path. I pushed you away in the cruelest way I could think of, hoping you'd hate me enough to never come back. It worked, Serena said softly. And now the Morrisons are back in my life. The merger Bradley was talking about, it would join our companies. Catherine's father is still the CEO. Does Catherine know about us, about the children? Not yet, but Bradley will tell them. He thinks he's protecting the company, but really, Alex trailed off. He's protecting his own interests, Serena finished. I recognize the type. The restaurant manager who fired me was the same way, always talking about the greater good while serving their own agenda. A knock at the door interrupted them. It was Sarah, looking nervous. Mom, Michael's getting into a fight with the other boys. They want to leave, but he says we should stay and fight. Serena stood up. We're not finished, she told Alex. I know, he replied. But Serena, whatever happens with the Morrisons, with Bradley, with anyone, I want you all to stay. Please, let me try to make this right. Serena paused at the door. We'll see, she said finally. Right now, our children need us. As they headed upstairs to deal with the fighting teenagers, neither of them noticed Victoria Kane watching from the shadows, her phone in her hand as she typed out a message to Bradley Winston. The seeds of chaos had been planted, and soon their world would explode into scandal, betrayal, and the ultimate test of love versus power. The morning headlines hit like a bomb. Tech billionaire's secret family revealed. Newspapers and gossip. Sites plastered photos of Serena and the quadruplets everywhere. Someone had leaked the story, complete with detailed information about their past. Alex stormed into his office, fury radiating from every step. Victoria, he shouted. She appeared in his doorway, looking nervous but defiant. Yes, Mr. Grayson. Did you do this? Did you leak the story to the press? Bradley thought it was better to control the narrative, she admitted. The story was going to come out anyway. This way we could at least manage how it was presented. By calling my children a scandal? By painting Serena as a gold digger? Alex slammed his fist on the desk. You're fired. Get out. Mr. Grayson, please, Victoria pleaded. I was just trying to protect the company. Get out. Back at the mansion, reporters crowded the gates. Inside, Serena tried to keep the children calm, but they were shaken by the sudden invasion of their privacy. Mom, they're saying awful things about you online, Sarah cried, showing her phone to Serena. Michael paced the room like a caged animal. I'll punch anyone who talks bad about our mom. No, you won't, Serena said firmly. We hold our heads high and ignore them. That's how we've always handled bullies, remember? The doorbell rang, making everyone jump. Mrs. Reynolds went to answer it, then came back looking worried. Ms. Catherine Morrison is here to see Mr. Grayson. Serena's heart sank. The children and I will go upstairs. No, David spoke up. This is our house too now, we're not hiding. Before anyone could argue, Catherine swept into the room. She was elegant and expensive looking, her blonde hair perfectly styled. Her eyes went straight to the quadruplets. My God, she whispered. They look just like him. Christopher stepped forward. That's because he's our father. Who are you? I'm Catherine Morrison. Your father and I were engaged once before. She glanced at Serena. Well, before. Why are you here? Serena asked quietly. To see for myself, and to warn you, my father is furious. He's calling an emergency board meeting. He wants Alex removed as CEO. He can't do that, David protested. It's Dad's company. It was the first time any of the children had called Alex Dad. The word hung in the air, changing everything. Your father built something remarkable, Catherine said, her voice softening. But my father has been waiting 15 years for revenge. This is his chance. The front door opened and Alex rushed in. He stopped short when he saw Catherine. Kathy, what are you doing here? Warning your family, she replied. Daddy's out for blood, Alex. The board meeting is in 2 hours. Bradley's already convinced half the board to vote against you. Alex looked at his children, at David, who'd just called him Dad, at Michael, ready to fight the world for his family, at Christopher and Sarah, huddled close to their mother. Let them try, he said. I'm done running from the truth. I'll testify, Catherine said suddenly. Everyone stared at her. I'll tell the board how my father threatened you back then, how he forced you to choose between love and your company. Why would you help us? Serena asked. Catherine smiled sadly. Because I was there 15 years ago. I saw how Alex loved you. The man my father wanted me to marry didn't exist. His heart was already yours. Alex's phone buzzed. The meeting's been moved up. They're trying to catch me unprepared. Then we'll all go, Michael announced. They need to see who they're really fighting. No, Serena started, but Sarah interrupted. Mom, you always taught us that family sticks together. We're a family now, all of us. Mrs. Reynolds appeared with Alex's briefcase and car keys. The garage has a private exit, she said. You can avoid the reporters. As they piled into Alex's largest car, Catherine touched his arm. I'll meet you there. And Alex, for what it's worth, I'm glad you found your real family. The drive to Grayson Enterprises was tense. Alex made phone calls to his loyal board members, while Serena helped the children straighten their clothes and hair. Remember, she told them, whatever happens in there, I'm proud of you all. We've survived worse than a bunch of rich people in suits. The underground parking garage was empty when they arrived, but Catherine was waiting by the elevator. Daddy's already up there, she said. Bradley's with him. They're showing the board members pictures from the newspapers trying to paint this as a scandal. Then let's show them the truth, Alex said, taking Serena's hand. The elevator ride to the top floor felt like ascending to a battlefield. When the doors opened, Alex's secretary gasped at the sight of them all. Mr. Grayson, the board is waiting in the main conference room. Good, Alex replied. It's time they met my family. He pushed open the conference room doors, and every head turned. Robert Morrison's face turned purple with rage. What is the meaning of this? He demanded. This, Alex said clearly, is my family, and before you vote on my future, you're going to hear our story. Bradley jumped up. This is irregular. The meeting has rules. Sit down, Bradley, Catherine snapped. For once in your life, be quiet and listen. The quadruplets stood tall beside their parents, their matching blue eyes challenging anyone to deny their heritage. Serena squeezed Alex's hand, giving him strength, and in that moment, facing down the power brokers who thought they could control his life, Alex finally understood what real wealth was. It wasn't in his bank accounts or his company's stock price. It was right. Here in the family he'd almost lost. The conference room crackled with tension. Robert Morrison stood at the head of the table, his face red with anger. This is a business meeting, not a family reunion, he shouted. You made it about family the moment you threatened mine. Alex replied calmly. He turned to address the board members. 15 years ago, this man forced me to choose between love and business. I made the wrong choice then. I won't make the same mistake twice. He abandoned us, Michael spoke up suddenly. Everyone turned to look at him. That's what you're all thinking, right? That he walked away from us? Well, you're wrong. Mom tried to tell him about us, but she was turned away. She raised us alone, working 2 jobs, never asking anyone for help. Sarah stepped forward, her voice shaking but clear. We didn't come here for money. We didn't even want to meet him. But now that we have, she looked at Alex with tears in her eyes. Now that we know him, we're not going to let you hurt him. Bradley scoffed. This is ridiculous. The boy admits it. Grayson abandoned them. He's not fit to lead this company. That's a lie, Catherine said, walking to stand beside Alex. And you know it, Bradley. You were there when my father threatened to destroy Grayson. Enterprises if Alex chose Serena over me, the board members murmured among themselves. Robert Morrison's face grew even redder. Catherine, have you lost your mind? No, Daddy. For the first time in 15 years, I'm thinking clearly. She faced the board. My father didn't care about me or Alex. He only cared about controlling Grayson's patents. When Alex fell in love with Serena, Daddy saw his chance slipping away. He threatened to bankrupt the company unless Alex ended things with her. David, who had been quiet until now, stepped forward. Is that true? He asked Alex. You gave up Mom because of him? Yes, Alex admitted. It was the biggest mistake of my life. I thought I was protecting my company, my employees. But all I did was let a bully win. Enough! Robert Morrison slammed his hand on the table. This company needs stable leadership, not some man distracted by his illegitimate family. Watch your mouth, Michael started forward, but Serena caught his arm. No, Michael, let me handle this. Serena walked up to Robert Morrison, her head held high. My children are not illegitimate. They are bright, kind, hard-working people who have overcome every obstacle life threw at them. Michael fixes things for our elderly neighbors. Sarah volunteers at the homeless shelter where we almost ended up. The twins tutor younger kids in math and science. They did all this while wearing second-hand clothes and going without things other kids took for granted. She turned to face the board members. You all have children, grandchildren. Look at my 4. Really look at them. They're survivors. They're fighters. And they get that from both their parents. Is that really the kind of family you want to punish? One of the older board members, Martha Chen, stood up. I've served on this board for 20 years. In that time, I've watched Alex Grayson build this company from nothing. Not by being ruthless like some people, she glanced at Robert Morrison, but by caring about his employees, his products, his customers. She walked over to the quadruplets. I saw the photos in the paper this morning, but seeing these children in person, my God, they're the spitting image of Alex when he first started this company. Young, determined, full of potential. Mrs. Chen, Bradley protested. The Morrison merger. Can go to hell, Martha interrupted, shocking everyone. I've never liked how Robert Morrison does business. If removing Alex is the price of merging with Morrison Tech, then the price is too high. Another board member stood up, then another. Soon the majority was standing, showing their support. Robert Morrison turned purple. This isn't over, Grayson. Catherine, come with me. No, Daddy, Catherine said softly. I'm done letting you control people's lives. As Robert stormed out, Bradley trailing behind him, the tension in the room broke. Board members came forward to meet the children properly. Martha Chen hugged Serena. Thank you, Alex told Catherine quietly. Just promise me one thing. She replied. Don't waste this second chance. Later that evening, back at the mansion, the family gathered in the living room. The reporters were still outside, but they didn't matter anymore. What happens now? Christopher asked. Now, Alex said, we start over. If you'll let me, I want to be part of your lives, really part of them, not just providing things, but being there, getting to know you. We missed a lot of time, Sarah said softly. Then we better not waste any more, Serena replied. She looked at Alex. The children need stability, and maybe their father too. Mom, Michael said seriously, are we staying? Serena looked around at her children, their hopeful faces, their father's eyes. Yes, she said finally. We're staying. But, she turned to Alex, we do this right. No shortcuts, no rushing. These 4 come first, always. Always. Alex agreed. He looked at his children, really looked at them. Michael, the protector. Sarah, the nurturer. David and Christopher, the bright minds hiding kind hearts. And Serena, the woman who had raised them to be everything he could have hoped for. The sound of Mrs. Reynolds calling them for dinner broke the moment. As they walked to the dining room together, Alex heard his children laughing, saw Serena smile, and knew that no business empire could ever be worth what he'd almost lost. But a shadow lurked at the edge of their happiness. Outside the mansion gates, Bradley Winston sat in his car, talking on his phone. "Don't worry, Mr. Morrison," he said quietly. "This isn't over. I have a plan that will bring Alex Grayson down once and for all." A week after the board meeting, life at the Grayson mansion was slowly finding its rhythm. Alex had moved his home office downstairs, so he could be more present with the family. The children were enrolled in the local private school, though they insisted on continuing to wear their old clothes instead of the expensive ones Alex offered to buy. "I don't want people thinking we're here for the money," Michael explained when Alex asked about it. That morning, Sarah was helping Mrs. Reynolds make breakfast when Alex came in, already dressed for work. "You're up early," he said, watching. His daughter expertly flipped pancakes. "Mom usually works breakfast shifts at the diner, so we all learn to cook," Sarah explained. "I like helping Mrs. Reynolds. She teaches me new recipes." "Sarah's a natural in the kitchen," Mrs. Reynolds beamed. "Much better than you ever were, Mr. Grayson." The twins stumbled in next, arguing about a math problem. "Dad," Christopher called out, then stopped, looking embarrassed at using the word. Alex's heart leaped. "Yes? Can you look at this? David thinks the answer is 42, but I say it's 38. Alex spent the next 15 minutes working through the problem with them, amazed at how quickly they grasped complex concepts. "You boys should come to the office sometime," he suggested. "See the technology department." Their eyes lit up, but before they could answer, Serena appeared. "First, they need to get through regular school. Today's their first day." Michael came in last, looking nervous, though he tried to hide it. "The reporters are still outside." Alex's face darkened. Despite winning the board's support, the media frenzy hadn't died down. If anything, it had gotten worse since Catherine publicly sided with them. "I'll drive you to school myself," he decided. "Alex," Serena pulled him aside. "Are you sure about this school? It's very elite." "They deserve the best education," Alex insisted. "They also deserve to feel comfortable," Serena countered. "These kids have grown up in a very different world." Before they could discuss it further, Alex's phone rang. It was Catherine. "Turn on the financial news," she said without greeting. "Now." Alex grabbed the remote and switched on the kitchen TV. The headline made his blood run cold. "Grayson Enterprises accused of patent fraud." Bradley Winston was on screen, standing next to Robert Morrison. "As former COO of Grayson Enterprises, I feel obligated to reveal that the company's key patents were obtained through fraudulent means. We have evidence that Alex Grayson stole these innovations from smaller companies and developers." "That's a lie," David shouted. "Dad would never steal anything." Serena hugged Sarah, who had started crying. "It's okay, sweetheart. Your father will fix this." "I have to get to the office," Alex said, already reaching for his keys. "No." Michael stepped in front of him. "You have to take us to school first." "You promised." Alex stopped, torn between his company and his children. Serena watched him, and he knew this was a test, one he couldn't fail again. "You're right," he said. "Family comes first. The lawyers can handle Bradley for an hour." The drive to school was tense. Alex tried to focus on giving the children confidence for their first day, but his mind kept going back to Bradley's accusations. "Why is he doing this?" Christopher asked. "I thought he was your friend." "Bradley's always been jealous of your father," a new voice said. They turned to see Catherine waiting in the school parking lot. "What are you doing here?" Serena asked, not unkindly. "Making things right," Catherine replied. "I know all about Bradley's evidence. It's fake. He and Daddy created it years ago. Has insurance against Alex. I can prove it." "Why didn't you say anything before?" Alex demanded. "Because I was part of it," Catherine admitted. "Back then, I thought if Alex lost everything, he might come back to me. I was wrong. And I'm sorry." The children watched this exchange with wide eyes. Finally, Sarah spoke up. "In our old school, there was a girl who used to bully me. But then one day she stood up for me against other bullies. Mom said people can change if you give them the chance." Serena smiled proudly at her daughter. "Yes, they can." The school bell rang. The children hesitated, clearly worried about leaving their parents at this moment of crisis. "Go," Alex said firmly. "Get an education. Make friends. Be normal. Kids for once. Let us adults handle Bradley." One by one they hugged their parents, even Michael, who tried to pretend he was too old for hugs. As they walked toward the school building, other students stared and whispered, but the quadruplets held their heads high. "They're stronger than we give them credit for," Serena observed. "They get that from their mother," Alex replied. Catherine cleared her throat. We should go. I have all the evidence on my laptop at home. Bradley and Daddy are giving a press conference at noon. I'll come with you, Serena announced. Both Alex and Catherine looked surprised. What? You think I survived? Raising quadruplets on a waitress's salary without learning how to fight. Besides, she smiled grimly, no one messes with my children's father. As they drove away, none of them noticed Bradley's assistant taking photos from a nearby car. She quickly sent them to her boss with a message. Catherine Morrison is working. With them. Should we move to Plan B? Bradley's response was immediate. Yes, it's time to destroy the great Alex Grayson once and for all, starting with those kids. The private school hallways buzzed with whispers as the Grayson quadruplets made their way to their classes. Sarah kept her eyes down, while Michael glared at anyone who stared too long. The twins walked together, creating their own bubble of protection. Did you hear? A girl whispered loudly. Their mother was just a waitress. They probably lived in some trailer park. Before Michael could react, a familiar voice cut through the gossip. Actually, their mother worked 2 jobs to give them a good life. Anyone got a problem with that? It was Jenny Morrison, Catherine's teenage daughter, standing with her hands on her hips. The whispering students quickly dispersed. You don't have to defend us, Michael said gruffly. Jenny smiled. My mom told me to look out for you guys. Besides, those snobs need someone to stand up to them. Meanwhile, at Catherine's penthouse, Serena watched as Catherine pulled up files on her computer. Bradley kept everything, Catherine explained. Emails, fake documents, even recordings of his meetings with Daddy. He thought it would protect him if anything went wrong. But why turn against Alex now? Serena asked. Because of the merger, Alex answered. If Bradley could prove I stole the patents, Robert Morrison could buy Grayson Enterprises for pennies on the dollar. Bradley would probably be made CEO. Catherine's phone buzzed. Her face went pale as she read the message. What is it? Serena asked. Bradley's assistant just sent this to everyone at school. Catherine turned her phone around, showing them a photoshopped picture of Serena in her old waitress uniform, made to look like she was working at a sleazy bar instead of a family restaurant. Those bastards, Alex growled. They're targeting the children. Serena was already grabbing her purse. I need to get to the school. Wait, Catherine said. There's more. Bradley's assistant included documents suggesting the children's birth. Certificates were forged, that they might not be Alex's after all. That's ridiculous, Serena exploded. Look at them, they're the spitting image of Alex. It doesn't matter if it's true, Catherine said quietly. All that matters is creating doubt. At the school, the quadruplets had gathered in the cafeteria for lunch when the whispers turned into something worse. Students were passing around phones, snickering. Hey, Graysons, a boy called out. Is this your mum? Guess we know how she caught a billionaire. Michael lunged forward, but David and Christopher caught his arms. Don't, Sarah pleaded. That's what they want. Jenny Morrison marched over and snatched the boy's phone. You're all pathetic, picking on people because of where they came from. What, are you afraid they might be smarter than you? Stay out of this, Jenny, the boy sneered. Your grandfather's trying to take down their fake father anyway. Fake? Christopher stepped forward. You want proof he's our father? Look at this. He pulled up the sleeve of his shirt, revealing a small birthmark on his arm, identical to the one Alex had shown. Them on his own arm just days before. All 4 of us have it, David added. Same place, same shape. The cafeteria went quiet. Jenny smiled triumphantly. But the moment was interrupted by the school principal. Michael, David, Christopher, and Sarah Grayson, please come to my office immediately. In the office, they found Serena already waiting, her face tight with anger. Mrs. Grayson, the principal began. Ms. Carter, Serena corrected firmly. Ms. Carter, we've received some concerning documentation about your children's enrollment. Their birth certificates are perfectly legal. Alex's voice boomed from the doorway. He strode in with Catherine beside him. And if you or anyone else suggests otherwise, my lawyers will bury this school. In lawsuits, the principal sputtered. Mr. Grayson, we have a responsibility. Your responsibility, Catherine interrupted, is to protect students from harassment, which you're failing at spectacularly. Mom, Jenny appeared in the doorway. I recorded everything. The way they were treating the Graysons, what that jerk Tommy said about Ms. Carter. I posted it online too. Jenny, Catherine gasped. That's not actually, Alex smiled. That's perfect. Let the world see how Bradley and Robert Morrison are attacking innocent children. Serena hugged her kids close. "Are you okay?" "We're fine, Mom," Sarah said. "Jenny stood up for us." "Yeah," Michael admitted grudgingly. "She's not bad for a Morrison." Jenny beamed. "Does this mean we can be friends now? Because I have some ideas about how to handle Bradley." Back at the mansion that evening, the family gathered in the living room. Mrs. Reynolds had made hot chocolate for everyone, including Jenny, who had come home with them. "The internet is exploding," Jenny announced, checking her phone. "My video has gone viral. People are furious at Bradley and Grandpa for targeting kids. The company's stock actually went up," Alex added. "Seems the public doesn't like corporate bullies." "But it's not over, is it?" Michael asked. "No," Alex admitted. "Bradley still has his fake evidence about the patents. The board meeting is tomorrow." "Then we'll all be there," Sarah said firmly. "Honey, I don't think—" Serena started. "Mom," David interrupted, "you always taught us to face our problems head-on, together." "Together," Christopher echoed. Alex looked at his children, so strong, so determined. Then at Serena, who had given them that strength. And finally, at Catherine and Jenny, unlikely allies who had become true friends. "Okay," he said. "Tomorrow, we face Bradley together. But tonight we have hot chocolate," Mrs. Reynolds announced, bringing in a fresh batch. "And I added extra marshmallows, because some days just need extra marshmallows." As they sat together, sharing comfort food and making plans, none of them noticed the small red light blinking on Sarah's phone. Bradley's spy software, secretly installed by his assistant during the chaos at school, recording everything they said. In his office across town, Bradley listened and smiled. "Enjoy your hot chocolate," he muttered. "Tomorrow the real war begins." The morning of the board meeting dawned grey and stormy. Sarah was the first to notice something wrong with her phone. "It's not working right," she told Michael, showing him how apps kept opening by themselves. Michael frowned. "Let me see." As he examined the phone, his eyes widened. "This isn't just glitching, someone's controlling it." In the kitchen, Alex was reviewing papers with Catherine when Michael burst in. "Dad, Bradley's been spying on us through Sarah's phone." Alex grabbed the phone, his face darkening. "Call Jenny," he told Catherine. "Her video skills might come in handy again." Meanwhile, at Grayson Enterprises, Bradley was setting up the boardroom for his presentation. Robert Morrison stood nearby, looking nervous. "Are you sure about this?" Morrison asked. "The public's turning against us after that school incident." "Trust me," Bradley smiled. "Once they hear what the Grayson brats were saying in private, no one will sympathize with them." "What are you talking about?" "I bugged the girl's phone, got recordings of everything, including some choice comments about you and your family." Robert Morrison paled. "You recorded minors without consent? That's illegal." "Relax, by the time anyone figures that out, we'll have control of the company." Neither man noticed Jenny Morrison hiding behind a plant, her phone recording everything they said. She quickly sent the video to Catherine with a message. "Got them." Back at the mansion, Serena was helping. The children get ready for the board meeting when the doorbell rang. A police detective stood outside with 2 officers. "Ms. Carter, I'm Detective Rivera. We need to speak with Bradley Winston. Our sources say he's here." "No," Serena frowned. "He's at the office." "What's this about?" "Illegal surveillance of minors, corporate espionage, and attempted extortion. We've been building a case for weeks." Alex came running down the stairs. "Detective, you got Catherine's evidence?" "Yes, sir. And Miss Morrison's new video is the final nail in the coffin. But we need to move fast." At Grayson Enterprises, the boardroom was filling up. Bradley stood confidently at the front, his laptop ready to play the secret recordings. "Before we begin," he announced, "I have some interesting audio that everyone needs to hear." "I don't think so," Jenny's voice rang out. She walked in with Catherine holding up her phone. "But I have a video everyone needs to see." Bradley's face went white as Jenny played his conversation with Robert Morrison from earlier. The board members muttered in shock. "You're too late," Bradley snarled, reaching for his laptop. But before he could press play, the doors burst open. Detective Rivera entered with her officers. "Bradley Winston, you're under arrest." "You can't do this." Bradley backed away. "Robert, tell them." But Robert Morrison was already hurrying out a side door, leaving Bradley to face the consequences alone. "My evidence." Bradley looked desperately at his laptop, but Jenny was faster. She grabbed it and handed it to Detective Rivera. "Evidence of your crimes, you mean?" Jenny smirked. "Got that too." As the police led Bradley away in handcuffs, Alex arrived with Serena and the quadruplets. The board members, seeing the family together, broke into spontaneous applause. "I don't understand," Sarah said. "What just happened?" Catherine stepped forward. Your new friend Jenny happened. She's quite the investigative reporter." Jenny blushed. "I just did what anyone would do. Nobody messes with my friends." "Martha." Chen called the board meeting to order. "I believe we've seen enough drama for one day. I move to permanently remove Bradley Winston from his position and end all merger discussions with Morrison Tech." The vote was unanimous. Later that evening, reporters gathered outside Grayson Enterprises as Alex made a statement. "Today, we saw what happens when greed and jealousy drive people to desperate acts. But we also saw the power of truth, friendship, and family. My children showed more integrity and courage than Bradley Winston ever did. I'm proud to be their father." At home, the family celebrated with Mrs. Reynolds' special dinner. Jenny joined them, now a regular part of their extended family. "I can't believe it's over," Serena said softly to Alex. "Not quite," he replied. "There's still one thing I need to do." He turned to address everyone at the table. "I've been thinking about names." The quadruplets looked up, confused. "Right now, your last name is Carter. If you want, only if you want, I'd like you to become Graysons legally, all of you." He looked at Serena. "And maybe we could finally be the family we were always meant to be." The room went silent. Sarah was the first to speak, tears in her eyes. "Are you asking Mum to marry you?" "Smooth, Dad." Michael grinned. Real smooth. But Serena was smiling, her eyes bright with tears. "After 15 years, you still can't just ask a simple question, can you?" "Is that a yes?" Alex asked hopefully. "What do you think, kids?" Serena looked at their children. "Should we make this official?" The quadruplets exchanged glances, then spoke in unison. "Yes." As the family hugged and celebrated, Mrs. Reynolds wiped away tears in the kitchen. Jenny snapped pictures, declaring this moment needed to go viral for all the right reasons. But in a dark office across town, Robert Morrison watched the happy scene on his phone and scowled. "Enjoy your victory, Alex," he muttered. "I still have one card left to play." He opened his desk drawer and pulled out an old envelope. Inside was a letter from 15 years ago, a letter that could destroy everything. Alex and Serena had just built. Wedding preparations were in full swing at the Grayson mansion. 3 weeks had passed since Alex's proposal, and Sarah had taken charge of the planning, working closely with Mrs. Reynolds to create the perfect celebration. "Not too fancy," Serena kept insisting. "Something simple and meaningful." But simple wasn't easy when you were marrying one of the richest men in the country. Every wedding planner in New York wanted the contract, and magazines offered fortunes for exclusive photo rights. "Mum," Michael called from the living room. "There's another reporter at the gate." Serena sighed. The media frenzy had gotten worse since Bradley's arrest. Everyone wanted the fairy tale story of the waitress and the billionaire reuniting after 15 years. The twins were at the dining room table, working on their science project. Since starting at their new school, they'd thrown themselves into their studies, especially after the principal had apologized for the earlier incident. "Dad?" David looked up as Alex came in. "Can you help us with this? We're designing a new type of solar cell." Alex beamed with pride. His sons had inherited his love for innovation, and their ideas were genuinely impressive. The doorbell rang, and Mrs. Reynolds answered it. "Mr. Grayson, there's a messenger with an urgent delivery." Alex signed for the package, a thick manila envelope with no return address. Inside was a single sheet of paper and an old worn letter. The note read, "Think your happy family is safe? Read this. You have 24 hours to resign as CEO, or I release it to the press. RM." Alex's hands shook as he unfolded the letter. It was in Serena's handwriting, dated 15 years ago. "Dear Alex, I'm writing this letter because I can't bear to face you. What I'm about to tell you will change everything. The baby isn't yours." "Alex?" Serena's voice made him jump. He quickly stuffed the letters into his pocket. "Everything okay?" she asked, noticing his pale face. "Fine," he lied. "Just business stuff." But as the day went on, the letter burned in his pocket. Could it be true? Had Serena been lying all this time? No, he told himself. Look at the children. They were so clearly his. The birthmark, the features, everything. That evening, Jenny came over with Catherine to discuss wedding plans. "Grandpa's acting weird," Jenny mentioned casually. "He's been locked in his office for days, making calls." Catherine frowned. "He's up to something, I know that look." Alex excused himself and went to his study. He pulled out the letter again, reading it more carefully. Something wasn't right. The paper was aged, yes, but his phone buzzed. A text. from an unknown number. "Time's running out, Grayson. Resign or tomorrow morning everyone learns the truth about those kids." Alex made a decision. He called Detective Rivera. "Can you analyze a letter? There's something I need to know." An hour later, the detective arrived with a forensics expert. They examined the letter under special lights. "This is clever," the expert said. "The paper is genuinely 15 years old, but the ink isn't. This was written recently on aged paper." "A forgery?" Alex felt relief flood through him. "A very good one," Detective Rivera noted. "But why, Dad?" Sarah stood in the doorway. "Jenny found something you need to see." In the living room, Jenny had her laptop open. "I've been going through Grandpa's old emails. Look at this exchange from 2 weeks ago." The emails were between Robert Morrison and a professional forger, discussing aged paper and matching handwriting samples. "He must have kept one of Mom's old notes or cards," Christopher realized. "Something to copy her handwriting from." "That's not all," Jenny continued. "He hired someone to fake Mom's signature on that letter. The same person who used to forge signatures for Bradley." Serena had been quietly listening. Now she stepped forward. "Alex, what letter?" Slowly, Alex pulled the forged letter from his pocket. As Serena read it, her face went from confused to angry. "That snake," she exploded. "He really thought this would work? That anyone would believe these amazing children aren't yours?" "Mrs. Grayson," Detective Rivera said, "would you be willing to make a statement?" "Ms. Carter," Serena corrected, automatically. Then she smiled. "At least for a few more days, and yes, I'll make a statement. It's time Robert Morrison learned what happens when you mess with my family." "Our family," Alex corrected, hugging her close. "Wait," Michael said. "What are we going to do?" Jenny grinned wickedly. "I have an idea, but we'll need Mom's help and Mrs. Reynolds' camera skills." Catherine raised an eyebrow. "Should I be worried?" "No," Jenny assured her, "but Grandpa should be." As the family huddled together, planning their response to Morrison's latest attack, Alex watched his children, their bright minds, working together, their loyalty to each other shining through. No forged letter could ever make him doubt that they were his. But in his mansion across town, Robert Morrison waited confidently for morning. Soon, he thought, the Grayson empire would be his. He had no idea that his own granddaughter was about to teach him the most expensive lesson of his life. The next morning, Robert Morrison strode confidently into his office, ready to watch Alex Grayson's world crumble. He'd scheduled a press conference for 9 a.m., where he would reveal the truth about the Grayson quadruplets. His secretary rushed in. "Sir, you need to see this. It's all over the morning news." Morrison flicked on the TV and froze. There was Jenny, his own granddaughter, standing with the Grayson family. Behind them was a large screen showing detailed forensic analysis of his forged letter. "My grandfather," Jenny was saying, "tried to destroy this family with lies. He hired a forger, the same one who helped Bradley Winston. We have proof." The camera cut to Detective Rivera. "We've arrested the forger, who has agreed to testify. Robert Morrison will face charges of attempted fraud, forgery, and harassment." Morrison grabbed his phone, but before he could call his lawyer, Catherine walked into his office. "Hello, Daddy," she said calmly. "The police are downstairs. I thought you might want to walk out with dignity instead of being dragged out in handcuffs." "Catherine, how could you do this to me?" "No, Daddy, how could you do this to yourself, to your family? Look what your hatred and greed have cost you." At the Grayson mansion, the family watched Morrison's arrest on TV. Sarah cuddled close to Serena. "Is it really over now?" she asked. "Almost," Alex smiled. "There's still one more thing we need to do." 3 days later, the Grayson garden was transformed. White flowers lined the path to a simple arch, under which Alex waited nervously. The quadruplets stood with him. Michael and the twins in suits, Sarah in a beautiful blue dress. The guests were few but meaningful. Catherine and Jenny, Martha Chen and other loyal board members, Detective Rivera, and even some of the children's new school friends. Mrs. Reynolds dabbed her eyes as Serena appeared, wearing a simple white dress that made her look like a princess. "Dearly beloved," the minister began, "we are gathered here today not just to unite two people in marriage, but to celebrate the triumph of love over time, truth over lies, and the unbreakable bonds of family." During the vows, Alex and Serena included promises not just to each other but to their children. "I promise," Alex said, his voice thick with emotion, "to spend the rest of my life making up for the years we lost, to be the husband and father this family deserves." "I promise," Serena replied, tears streaming down her face. To trust in our love, to believe in second chances, and to remember that the greatest wealth is the love we share. Now, the minister smiled, I believe the children have something they'd like to say. One by one, the quadruplets stepped forward. Michael spoke first. When we first met, Dad, I was ready to hate him, but he proved that it's never too late to be the person you're meant to be. He showed us that family isn't about where you live or how much money you have, David added. It's about who stands beside you when times are tough, Christopher continued. Sarah completed their thought. And who loves you no matter what. There wasn't a dry eye in the garden as Alex and Serena were pronounced husband and wife. As they kissed, the children cheered, and Mrs. Reynolds released a dozen white doves. At the reception, Jenny caught the bouquet, making Catherine laugh. Not until you're 30, Detective Rivera danced with Michael, who had decided he wanted to study law enforcement. The twins discussed solar energy with Martha Chen, who offered them internships when they were older. Sarah helped Mrs. Reynolds serve the wedding cake she had helped bake. Look at them, Serena said softly to Alex as they danced. Everything we went through was worth it for this moment. Worth every second, Alex agreed. Though I still wish... No more regrets, Serena stopped him. We have today and tomorrow and all the days after. That's what matters. Later that night, as the party wound down, the family gathered in the garden. The children were tired but happy, not even complaining. When their parents got romantic... Gross, Michael muttered, but he was smiling. So, Jenny asked, what happens now? Sarah looked around at her family, her strong, loving mother, her father who had moved heaven and earth to be with them, her brothers who protected each other fiercely. Their new friends who had proven loyalty was thicker than blood. Now, she said, we live happily ever after. Without the drama, David asked hopefully. Oh, there will always be drama, Serena laughed. We're Graysons now, but we'll face it together. Alex hugged his family close, marveling at how complete his life felt. The empire he'd built seemed small compared to the wealth of love surrounding him. Above them, a shooting star streaked across the sky. 4 teenage voices made wishes at once, then laughed at their synchronicity. One more reminder of their special bond. What did you wish for? Jenny asked. The quadruplets exchanged glances, then Michael spoke for all of them. Nothing. We already have everything we ever wanted. As night fell on the Grayson estate, the family lingered in the garden, sharing stories and dreams. Tomorrow would bring new adventures, new challenges, perhaps even new battles. But they would face them as they had faced everything else, together, bound by a love that had survived 15 years of separation and emerged stronger than ever. And in the end, that was the greatest victory of all. The end.